Private Detective Rain Willow waited at the flagpole on Front Street, Hamilton. The cold winter breeze blew more fiercely than he imagined as waves crashed against the large dock and blew the Bermuda flag attached to the flagpole like a menacing omen. He looked up at the flag. Rain held a cigarette firmly between two fingers and knew, deep down, that the evidence he was about to reveal would bring the killers who hid in plain sight to justice. However, injustice and corruption sang louder than the wicked gust of wind. Private Detective Rain Willow. Zoe spoke as she saw him after walking to the flagpole, still paranoid that she was being watched. Cheers and holiday festivities ended as the police encouraged the remaining crowds to head home, an hour before the streets became empty, and armed officers could be seen in police cars searching through the city of Hamilton. Zoe had to play her cards right with this private detective. Police Detective Rosso warned her about their kind and how they would bend the laws of legal policing to get information related to solving a case and bringing evidence forward to the prosecutors. Rain turned around with a soft smile upon his face as his voluminous hair showed creeping from his midnight black fedora worn above his head. "So you actually came," Rain stated as his voice carried in the strong gust of wind that blew forward as a patrol car's sirens cried into the foreboding darkness of the grim streets. Zoe looked back as her paranoia peaked, but Rain stayed calm and reached into his pocket, pulling out a brown envelope with the word "evidence" in big, bold letters on the front. "Zoe, here is my proposition. You can collect this only if you swear to join the private detective team and leave the sheltered life in the police service." Zoe shot back in surprise, then crossed her arms over her blue and black police vest. "Why would I ever do that? Why not join my team and me as we tackle the most gruesome crimes in the criminal underworld of Bermuda? And live on the front line of the law, risking my safety to persecute serial killers and terrorists?" "I think not, Rain." Rain sighed heavily, then passed the brown envelope into Zoe's hands. "Fine then, but the code to catch this old serial killer is in this envelope." "I bade you well on your adventures, Constable Zoe Constable," Rain replied, then pulled out another cigarette and ignited the tip with a match. The gray smoke rose into the air, and Zoe gagged slightly at the smell. Zoe looked down at the brown envelope, its unexpected weight a physical reminder of the choice now resting in her hands. "I hope this will be the monster's undoing," Zoe doubtfully thought. The acrid scent of Rain's cigarette smoke still hung heavy in the air, contrasting with the sterile smell of the police station and the safety she felt behind the blue and black vest. "Wait," Zoe called out, her voice cutting through the silence of the cool breeze and salty mist that splashed delicately upon her cheek like a light touch from a feather. "What is it, Zoe? Have you changed your mind already?" Rain questioned with glee. He rested his arms gently on the railing as the cigarette burned away like time slipping from the active homicide case, and the ash fell to be carried away by the wind like a soft, reminiscent dream. "Why me? Why did you choose to give this evidence to me knowing full well I won't join you? The police service is where I'll stay. However, I am very grateful for your help regarding this difficult case that's full of dead ends." Zoe finished her sentence, her voice steadying as she looked directly at him. Rain let out a soft, dry chuckle that was swallowed by the rhythmic waves crashing lightly upon the harbor, like jazz below. "Because Zoe, you are the only one that cares about the victims over paperwork and glory. You don't try to stand out amongst the rest and chase publicity through the means of solving cases to try and make a name for yourself," Rain said, his playful tone suddenly vanishing, replaced by a cold, sharp sincerity. "The rest of them want a closed file, you want justice. I don't need you to join me. I need you to finish this." He turned away from the railing after flicking his half-smoked cigarette in the dark waters below. Without another word, he walked away from Zoe, 2 fingers tipping the front of his fedora as he sank back into the shadows of mystery, leaving her alone with the ocean breeze, the heavy silence, and the secrets sealed inside the brown envelope. Time passed like the joy of a smoke. Zoe, whose shift had ended, was now home in her kitchen, writing her resignation letter as she pondered the brown envelope. She wondered whether to reveal its contents to the police detectives, such as Detective Rosso, but then remembered why Rain had chosen her and decided it was best to keep it discreet. Zoe had served 2 years in the police service and questioned if she would ever get a promotion. It had always been her dream to become a detective, leading homicide cases with the resources and workforce to pursue such human resources in accordance with staffing. Still, now she was contemplating whether she should join Rain and become a private detective without the four walls of police safety around her. It would be a grim task to hand in her resignation letter to her superiors, especially after showing promise in firearms. Maybe they have a different pathway for me, and that's to become proficient in armed response. I know politics lies beyond the hierarchy further than I can see, Zoe spoke quietly to herself as she began to open the envelope out of curiosity and a sense of duty. As she dumped out its contents, she noticed a newspaper, dated 1999, the day after New Year's, with the headline, "Murder on New Year's Day." She read further and deduced that this killer was no rookie and that they had been killing for years without ever being found, with no evidence left at the crime scene. However, 1999 was a time when Bermuda, along with the rest of the world, entered modern times away from massive wars between superpowers and into the age of advancing technology, especially when it came to capturing criminals. Still, Zoe questioned why Rain wore his attire as if he were stuck in the 1960s. While reading through the paper and flipping through the pages, she found a collection of grainy photos of the 1999 crime scene. It displayed the body of a bank clerk sprawled out in their home, covered in multiple lacerations. She looked closer at another photograph and, to her surprise, saw a man just behind the police cordon wearing the same distinct 1960s-style trench coat and fedora that Rain wore today. Zoe's breath hitched. If the photo was from 1999, and the style was from the 1960s, Rain hadn't just adopted a vintage look, he had been wearing it for decades. More unsettling still, the man in the photo didn't look a day older than the Rain she saw today. No, that's impossible. Rain is still full of youth, I can see it in his face and the way he carries himself so freely, as if there are no consequences in enforcing the law. Just below the headline, the article continued. The journalist noted that the police were baffled, lacking the DNA database infrastructure that would standardize forensic science just a few years later. Zoe looked from the paper to her half-written resignation letter. The hierarchical politics of the police service, the allure of the armed response unit, and her dream of leading homicide cases suddenly felt small compared to the mystery sitting on her desk. Rain wasn't just offering her a job as a private investigator, he was handing her a cold case that seemed to defy time itself. There was a knock at her door, sharp and rhythmic. 3 precise raps that echoed through the kitchen. Zoe instinctively slid the 1999 newspaper along with the photographs of the crime scene back into the brown envelope and tucked it inside a drawer, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Her hand hovered near her drawer, a lingering habit from her firearms training before she stepped forward to open the door. Standing outside her home, amid the rain that began to downpour after a loud boom of thunder, was Detective Rosso in his formal attire. "Ms. Constable, how nice it is to see you. Could you let me in? I forgot my umbrella, and the rain caught me by surprise." "I'll only be a nuisance until the rain subsides," Detective Rosso said as they stood with authority. Yes, please come in. I would hate for you to get wet on what was supposed to be a night full of festivities," Zoe said, stepping back to let him cross the threshold. Detective Rosso surveyed the house for any sign of Private Detective Rain, as word had spread that a woman with snow-white hair had been walking among the empty streets of Hamilton in a police uniform. Then he closed the door. "How can I help you, Detective Rosso?" "As you know, my shift has ended, and I'm readying myself for bed." Zoe lied smoothly until she saw him look at the resignation letter resting on her kitchen counter, along with a pen. Zoe's heart thumped in her chest more quickly than a sparrow's take off because of danger. She tried desperately to stand in front of Rosso and block his view, but it was already too late. "What are you writing, Zoe? I never thought you were going to be a writer by night. I hope it is not your resignation letter, because that's exactly why I came here in the first place, to let you know you have been dismissed. Did you really think we wouldn't know that you met up with that vile private detective who calls himself an investigator?" Detective Rosso said in a cold, condescending tone. Zoe smiled nervously, then spoke with fear, I don't know what you're talking about, Detective Rosso. Oh, so you don't know. I suppose we can brush aside my premonition, however, we spotted you on camera. Don't think for a second that those speed cameras we installed were for looks, Zoe. They also capture facial features through the use of artificial intelligence, and we easily identify you. What? What are you talking about? I thought those were only in other countries, not Bermuda. How can you do this when the public wasn't even notified? Such an excuse to use the public as a means of protecting yourself against your illegal action, and that was to meet with that criminal. And I say that those facial recognition cameras are there to protect the public from the criminals that roam around the island causing nothing but mischief. Pickford is the island savior, Zoe, and bureaucracy is dead. Zoe gasped lightly. She agreed inwardly with Rosso about Pickford, however, bureaucracy is dead. What is he talking about? Zoe inquired introspectively. She was flabbergasted by his words, but scorn settled deep in her heart like a crimson cancer. Like I thought, no words in response to what I said, and indeed I shall now take my leave. After Detective Rosso said with a slightly raised voice, the door banged shut with the help of the harsh wind to set a tune of lightly strummed tension upon a violin. Left with no choice, she would join him, for even justice has its ethical flaws, or so she hoped.